The following is the Fatal 4-Way Podcast, and it is scheduled for one fall.
Welcome into the Fatal 4-Way, everybody. I am your host, Dylan Oliver, joined by my co-host, Luke Carter, Rippy Galindo, and we're back with 4 this week. Justin Lassertosa is here as well. We had a huge weekend in the WWE with the Saudi Arabia show Crown Jewel. So today, we're just here to review what happened there, talk about what happened on, or what's going to happen on Monday Night Raw later tonight. Well, technically what's already happened as it was pre-recorded because it also took place in Saudi Arabia. But before we begin the review of Crown Jewel, we know that Mr. Luke Carter here has some very passionate opinions on WWE and their partnership with Saudi Arabia and having shows in Saudi every couple times a year. So I'm just going to, Luke, the floor is yours. Go ahead and speak freely here on this topic.
Yeah, so I've felt this way for a very long time, and this isn't even going to get into the moral and political side of the Saudi Arabia partnership, but this is just purely from the product standpoint. WWE in Saudi Arabia just doesn't work. And I understand from a financial standpoint how much money you get, but every time there's one of these Saudi shows, I feel every single time like it just interrupts the flow of every current storyline. Because when you go to Saudi Arabia, it's almost like you feel forced to have the faces win because the crowd is so casual in Saudi Arabia. Also, another thing for Saudi Arabia with me is the lack of representation from the crowd in any women's match. The crowd will literally go dead silent for every women's match. There will be no pops, no cheers, and that's just the way things are over there. But it's not fair to the women on the WWE roster because, like, for instance, the Fatal 4-Way Tag Team match was arguably the best match on the card this past week. We'll get into it later, but the crowd was completely dead and no one cared, and it's so unfair. And for them to be clamoring to get WrestleMania and chanting for WrestleMania at the press conference, if WWE ever did a press conference in WrestleMania, a WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia, it would be awful. And it's just, at some point, I feel like the partnership just needs to end. I get the financial thing, but you've already milked so much money out of it, and you're sacrificing your product to go to this country that it just doesn't work in. And also, the pay-per-views are so early in the morning in America, and it doesn't feel big. It doesn't feel important. Like, we have started the road to WrestleMania. Like, we're there. We're building toward it, and I feel like this pay-per-view really just was a halt.
Especially when you start the card off with Usos and Roman versus the Bloodline Now as the first match that early in the morning. No one's going to see that.
And every time there's a Saudi show, you have to pre-tape a Raw or SmackDown either before or after. And it's like, we want to watch the show live. Like, in today's day in the world, like, everyone has social media. You're going to get things spoiled for you because every time there's a Saudi show, you have to pre-tape an episode of Raw or SmackDown, or both. In this case, both this week are pre-taped. So I really just wish they would end the partnership in total. Like, the Crown Jewel Championship is so useless. Cody will come out with it tonight, and we'll never see it again.
Yeah, I don't necessarily hate the idea of, like, the concept of the Crown Jewel Championship of, like, all right, we're going to have our two top champions face off every single time at this time. Once a year, you collect rings, and it's like a yearly kind of achievement thing. But I agree. I feel like it's kind of a force feed Saudi money thing that they're kind of going for here.
Like, we're having Gunther eat a pin that he shouldn't have to eat.
And that we'll get to later.
That
was a very questionable call, to say the least, to have Gunther lose that. And I also think even having that match to begin with at this show was a little bit crazy, but that's a different conversation. I just think with Saudi, at this point, it's kind of like beating a dead horse because, like, originally 2018-19, whenever the Saudi deal kind of came into full force, no one wanted it. And to this day, no one wants it. But are they going to make millions and millions of dollars from it? Yeah.
Money
so,
talks.
I mean, like, it's just kind of the inevitable, like, all right, we're going to get 2 shows a year in Saudi Arabia. Honestly, like, the only one that I would say is memorable was Clash of Champions last year, and we all know what happened there with Jimmy turning on Roman. But outside of that, I just think the crowd's been dead practically every single time, and it's kind of just a forced show in a way.
Yeah, well, let's just jump now into the match card and talk about everything that happened on this show, Crown Jewel. The night started off with quite a big match. It started with the OG Bloodline versus the nowadays Bloodline. We had Roman Reigns, Jimmy Uso, and Jey Uso versus Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Jacob Fatu. And it was a good match. It was a classic like Roman Reigns tag team Bloodline type of match. There was carnage left everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I honestly found it quite shocking that, not too shocking that the new Bloodline won, but the fact that they pinned Roman Reigns, of all the people in the match, in order to win that match. What did you guys think about it?
Yeah, I thought this was the highlight of the show. I thought this, I understand why Cody and Gunther main evented because it's the Crown Jewel Championship, but this felt like the most important match to me on the show. And I actually did like the result of the Bloodline winning. It can be argued if Roman should have been the one to take the pin or not, but it added to the shock factor, and it actually progressed the story. It's the one match on this card that I feel like did its job progressing the story because you have Sammy coming out after the match to link up with the old Bloodline. So this one does get a thumbs up for me. I know I just went on that whole rant, but this match, good match, thumbs up for me, good result. I liked it.
Yeah, I think it was I'd give it a thumbs up as well. I personally wasn't a fan of Roman taking the pin like that. Now, Roman taking the pin itself is a different story. I expected that. But after just a couple spikes, I didn't really, I don't know. I feel like it could have gone on a couple minutes longer, and then you pin Roman. But I do agree it was a good match. It furthered the storyline. I still feel like they're kind of rushing this in its entirety. I feel like they had months and months and months to build up Jey and even Sammy kind of clashing with this new Bloodline a little bit more. And I haven't really felt as fulfilled as I'd like to be with this storyline, and I don't think I will with the little amount of time we have up until Survivor Series. I don't think they've done a good job timeline-wise, but this match, it was great. I'll give it a 3.7. For a Bloodline match, maybe like a 3.1, but as a whole, 3.7.
I really enjoyed seeing my GOAT, Sami Zayn, come back into the story of the Bloodline. When Sami was with the Bloodline, that was one of the best eras of wrestling ever. Debate me about it. But, yeah, I just like seeing him come back. And I think the Usos and Roman Reigns, they still got some figuring out to do. There's still that moment where I think it was Jimmy that Jey was looking over at Roman, about to hot tag him, and then tagged his twin brother Jimmy instead. So there's still some figuring out they got to do. It doesn't seem like it's going to go back to the original Bloodline times like it was, which makes me think the Sammy, I don't know what his involvement is going to be, whether he's more loyal to Jey or Roman, which I think he'll be more loyal to Jey and Jimmy, going forward. But it was cool to see him come back, and I hope that he's more involved in the story going forward. But, yeah, I thought the match was great, and I enjoyed seeing it.
Yeah, the match was pretty solid. There was one little awkward moment, you could say, when Roman initially got spiked by Solo, and Jimmy came in a little late trying to break up the pin, so Roman just didn't kick out, but the ref stopped counting the 3, and they acted like Jimmy broke it up, but it wasn't. That part was a little bad, but other than that, it was a pretty solid match that I enjoyed. And I just gotta say, Solo Sikoa at Crown Jewel might be the greatest wrestler of all time. Last year, pinned John Cena one-on-one clean. This year, pinned Roman Reigns, 2 of the greatest of all time, back-to-back years. Crown Jewel Solo is a different animal.
And that's our problem with the Crown Jewel right there. Solo's the best wrestler
of all time. Anyways, the next match on the card was the 8-women tag team match for the tag team titles, where we saw Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill end up retaining their tag team titles. And what was honestly a pretty phenomenal match, pretty cool spots. I love to see all the high-flying moves off the turnbuckles, all the moonsaults. Everything that happened in this match was very entertaining. But again, like Luke said, the crowd wasn't that into it, which was very unfortunate. But I personally enjoyed this match a lot. What did you guys think about it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as well. I just think it's a bit like this is another thing. Like I feel like they're kind of dragging on this story of Belair and Jade Cargill, and I feel like another team could kind of benefit from these titles. Any one of these 4 teams involved, especially Io Sky and Kairi Sane. Like I feel like you got to get them involved in some way. So I did enjoy the match specifically, but the outcome I'm not so sure. I'll give it a thumbs up though. It was solid.
I really liked Lash Legend and Jakara Jackson. I think they have a lot of potential. I think they can be a great team moving forward and kind of carry the torch in this division. And I'm okay with them not pulling the trigger in a fatal 4-way in Saudi Arabia and giving them the moment when they'll actually get cheered for it. So, yeah, but really good match. All the women did out there. They went out there. They did their thing. They showed off why they're great. And I'm okay with the result. And let the Bianca Jade thing simmer a little longer before we really cut the knife through it and get on the road to those two facing each other.
Yeah, like you were saying earlier about all this, the Saudi Arabia pay-per-views, is that, yeah, you can hate on them for just making the face win, Bianca and Jade, but when it's a women's match, I guess you have to, because you can't have some big belt change like that happen there when they just don't get the support. So, yeah, I do like them winning and continuing on the story, and I did like all the jumps off the turnbuckle. Like it was a very entertaining match. The what you call that move? The moonsault. Moonsaults. That's a fun one. Yeah, but I like the match. It was predictable. Did we all predict that they would retain?
No,
I said they retain.
I tried to be different and took Lash Legend, and that didn't work out, but it's all right. The next match, I believe, was Seth Rollins versus Bronson Reed, and what I thought was a pretty solid match. I enjoyed it. Do I think the right person won? Probably not, but I also don't think that this feud is over. I think that this will continue on throughout the next pay-per-view next month or whatever. And so I do think that it's just setting up maybe a trilogy between these two. But I did like a lot of the spots, like the stomp on the steps. I don't love the fact that Bronson Reed tried to hit Seth Rollins with the steps in a just regular match, which would have gotten him disqualified unless the ref just chooses not to disqualify him, because that's what they do sometimes with steel steps. But I thought it was great. Bronson Reed got cut open, started bleeding towards the end of the match. Bronson still looked very strong in the match despite losing, and it took a curb stomp off the top rope in order to put Bronson down and finish him off. So I thought it was a great match, and I'm not insanely mad about Seth winning. I do think Bronson should have won, but overall, I give it thumbs up. Good match.
Yeah, you hit the points for me. I hope they do Brunson right moving forward, because, I mean, Dylan hit it on in the predictions. He kind of said, I think they're just going to have Seth win because the Saudi Arabia crowd wants to see Seth win, and that's what they did. So if they can make up for it and Brunson looks very strong continuing the feud and he ends up winning the feud, fine, whatever. They can have the Saudi Seth win, but they better make up for it now, because I think it's ridiculous he lost.
I think that Reed will be compensated in the form of several wins coming, maybe even a belt, I don't know, but he did look like he lost the match and still looked like a monster. He took 3 curb stomps and was still standing up in the ring telling Seth to come back in and start fighting again. I think this is my favorite feud in the WWE right now, just because you can tell they hate each other so much in every match they have, even on a Raw outside of the arena.
The brawl they had on Monday Night Raw was excellent.
It
was
was
great.
insane, and they were just throwing each other into tables, smacking each other with trash barrels and whatnot. Every time these guys see each other, they just want to take each other's heads off, and I'm loving every single bit of it.
Yeah, it's been a very physical feud, and it's one of those blood feuds that, like, maybe there is not like this deep, intricate story behind it. It's just two guys who absolutely hate each other, and I love it too. I agree that Bronson should have won, especially because I feel like on this road to WrestleMania, especially when CM Punk returns, I hear a lot of people saying you don't really need a face and a heel in this Seth versus Punk feud, which I kind of see that point. But I also feel like Rollins' reign as this visionary, dress up all colorful, is kind of run its course. And I feel like if you're going to have him feud with CM Punk, why not just turn him heel? Because personally, I think heel Seth Rollins is better than face Seth
Agreed.
Rollins.
I think everyone can agree with that.
Yes. So why not just make that change? It's been 2.5, 3 years, however long it's been. And this could be Bronson Reed win would have been a perfect way to do so. But yeah, Saudi shows it's pretty typical to have the face win. So kind of expected. But match as a whole, it was probably one of my favorite matches on the show. I'll give it a 3.9. That's a thumbs up.
And then another match that was scheduled for the show was Kevin Owens versus Randy Orton. However, the match technically never actually started. The two made their entrances. Randy was up on the turnbuckles doing his signature, just awesome pose. And then Kevin Owens attacked him with a steel chair, just started going after him, and they just had a brawl. And they just brawled for about 10 minutes, maybe 15. I'm not great with time. Maybe it was less. But they just were brawling, and the bell never rang. And they went and fought in the crowds, and they put him on a table, and Kevin Owens jumped off a high railing right through the tables with Randy, and they claimed that Randy had to get carted out, but KO was able to walk out, and that was pretty much that. That was the storyline, and I was pretty disappointed about it because I wanted to see an actual match and not just whatever this was.
This could have been achieved on the SmackDown beforehand. Could have had the same brawl and then not done the match at the pay-per-view, given the 10 minutes to another match that could have used it more, like the Bloodline match. I agree. I'd rather them not have the match in Saudi, but just do the angle on the SmackDown and don't advertise the match. It kind of bewildered me. That's how I feel.
It does kind of seem like they messed up the card because that Roman and Usos Bloodline match was added
day before.
Yeah,
technically.
So just sub it out and do Randy and Kevin Owens. And
this is the problem you run into when you have to pre-tape the SmackDown before.
Exactly. Yeah. But honestly, I didn't hate it. I thought it was really fun.
It was a good brawl, and Kevin Owens looked strong.
If it was a match, it would have been, I think, my favorite match of the card because it was very fun to watch. Watching him drive an elbow through Randy and smash him through the table was fun.
But the match wouldn't have had a no DQ stipulation. So
that's true.
It shouldn't have been on the pay-per-view. I like what they did. Shouldn't have been on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and this is another thing. I feel like it's weird. I feel like since post-WrestleMania, a lot of these storylines have become a little rushed. And as much as I love this Kevin Owens-Cody Rhodes feud, I think that's personally my favorite storyline in WWE. I think the Randy versus Kevin angle has kind of been rushed a little bit, just in the sense of he was kind of playing that middleman at first, and I know they had that whole altercation on that first SmackDown after Bad Blood. But I feel like there's other ways to kind of build to this. I feel like maybe Crown Jewel was a little too early to pull the trigger on it. I don't know. That's just me. But I thought the match was pretty cool. I mean, it's two guys who do their job very well. I think it was a fun fight. And you didn't really have to give the loss to either of them. So I do see the standpoint also of, like, why don't you just do this on SmackDown? But I feel like this is a feud that kind of needs to be developed more so on a PLE as well. So I didn't hate it. Also at the same time, like, a no contest finish is never something that I'm going to be like, oh, that was so cool. So it was all right. It could have been better.
Hey, and maybe Randy wanted to RKO Adam Pearce really badly, and the only way they'd let him do it is on a match on a pay-per-view and not a SmackDown or Raw.
But also now with this Randy not technically winning the match because the match never happened, or anyone winning, Randy still has not won a PLE singles match since WrestleMania 37. So let's just keep that streak alive until he retires, I guess. Another match that happened was the United States Championship triple threat match.
Finally on a PLE. Can I add that?
Yeah, finally. Between LA Knight, Andrade, and Carmelo Hayes. I loved this match. I loved the spots. I loved the finish. What did you guys think about this one?
This match was awesome. I think both of you guys were talking about how LA Knight has lost his steam since winning the United States Championship. I think Justin brings up a great point. I think he was kind of losing that steam because he wasn't being put on pay-per-view. He got to display why he gained so much popularity in the first place. This match was great. Andrade is so smooth and so good in the ring. If he can become any better of a talker, he can be a huge star. I know he's gotten a little slow start since returning at the Rumble, but I think he's so great. And man, the future for Carmelo Hayes, the sky is the limit.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people say Braun Breaker is the next future big star in WWE, which I agree with, but I think Carmelo Hayes might have an even higher ceiling. I mean, the kid's going to be special.
I think within a year or two, we'll be looking at him as, like, not necessarily, like, the heat that he garners, but kind of like the Dominic Mysterio of where, like, he's clearly one of...
Dominic Mysterio with great in-ring work.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's no slack on Dom in the ring, but Carmelo is just one of the best wrestlers on this planet. And I think people will start recognizing him once he gets into more higher profile feuds as one of the top heels in the business. And Andrade, again, if we're talking about some of the best wrestlers in the world, he might be top 10. Like, genuinely, he is one of, if not the best, I wouldn't say the best, but he's a top 5 in-ring worker in the company right now.
The combination of technical work along with high-flying and athletic ability is so rare.
Yeah.
You don't see it often.
Yeah, like the only guys, I mean, like Ilya Dragunov,
Yeah.
but like he's out. Like there's not many who could do it. But as much as I love Andrade and Carmelo, and they both deserve to be on a PLE, LA Knight should have won this, and he did, so I'm happy. This was my favorite match on the show, and I feel like this is a really good way to pay off Andrade versus Melo. That feud also give LA Knight a big win, and I'm sure he'll continue feuding with either one of these guys, potentially at Survivor Series, a one-on-one match, or some throw-off SmackDown. But you really needed a high-quality match like this to kind of rejuvenate this title reign. So I'll give this one a 4.3.
It definitely adds excitement to the U.S. title for sure, just because you're having these exciting guys that are up-and-coming stars competing for that title and making it a very real possibility that they could snag it. So I'm excited to see how this feud and how Carmelo Hayes in particular advances to maybe taking this belt from LA Knight at some point, but I think he does have to finish that feud with Andrade and then go after the belt. So we'll see how that turns out.
And then the last two matches on the show that we'll be talking about today was the 2 Crown Jewel championship matches between Liv Morgan, the women's world champion, and Nia Jax, the women's champion. And then they also had Cody Rhodes, the WWE champion, versus Gunther, the world heavyweight champion. So let's just jump into the women's Crown Jewel championship match between Nia Jax and Liv Morgan.
This match was bad. This was one of my least favorite PLE matches of the year. 1, the crowd was dead. 2, it was an overbooked mess, and none of the timing just felt so off. Liv couldn't carry Nia Jax. They just didn't have the chemistry. It felt rushed. It felt meaningless. You knew Tiffy wasn't cashing in when she came out, too. It was just bad.
Yeah.
I was sleeping through it. Less than 2 stars. I don't even want to spend that much time talking about it. Congrats on the ring, Liv.
Yeah, I'm not sure why she came out with that Money in the Bank in the first place. I didn't hate seeing Raquel come in and jump in and get involved somehow, but it still did. They didn't.
It just felt messy.
Yeah, they didn't do it correctly, and I don't know. It doesn't seem like the Money in the Bank storyline is going anywhere, and they kind of are ruining it in the process to WrestleMania, which I guess is that what they're building up that Money in the Bank for? Are they even going to use it? I don't know.
Eventually,
At some
Tiffy's
point,
gonna
she
cash in
will.
on Nia. It's just
You
knew it wasn't gonna be in Saudi. That's
Right.
how I feel.
Yeah, this match sucked, to put it bluntly. This was awful. I hated it. These are also 2 workers who I don't feel like their styles necessarily mesh well with each other. I did not enjoy this match whatsoever. And I would like to quickly segue to the next one because it's not even worth my time talking about it because, I don't know, it's just it was a snooze fest, to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was bad. So let's just jump into the main event. We had Cody Rhodes versus Gunther for the Crown Jewel Championship. And with this one, the match was all right. It was fine. Two great workers. I just hate the concept of the champion versus champion, because they are your two faces of your brands. They are your world champions that you need to build up and keep looking strong. And so what is the point of putting the two of them together where you have to make one lose? Like, we're doing this every single year now for Crown Jewel? It does not make sense to me to continuously have to make one of them look weaker just for Saudi Arabia money. I hate the concept, and I hate that champion versus champion. Oh, it ends up on a roll-up pin, because that's really the only way you can do it without making your person look weaker than the other. So I just think it's bad, and the match was fine, but overall I didn't like the concept, and I don't like the pay-per-view as a whole.
Can I just say, too, I said this one like a couple weeks back when this was initially brought up, but why are we rushing Gunther Cody when this could easily be one of the best matches of this generation?
Yeah.
And you could back it with an actual story to tell. Why are we rushing it? They're both on completely different sides in terms of stories. They have no correlation. This was just completely forced. The match itself I thought was good. You put those two in the ring, they're not going to have a bad match, but it definitely did not live up to what it should have, and that's because it was rushed. Expectation-wise, I'm giving this a 3.1.
All right, so really quick before we go, we have a number one contenders fatal four-way on Monday Night Raw tonight for Gunther's World Heavyweight Championship. Damian Priest, Dominic Mysterio, Sheamus, and Seth Rollins. Let's really quick go around, give your predictions. I am taking Dominic Mysterio. I think that could be a lot of fun. Give me Dom.
I am also going with Dominic Mysterio. Love the guy.
I'm going to go with Damian Priest. As much as I'd love to see a Dom Gunther feud, I think Priest gets his rematch.
I really want, as a Sheamus fan, really want Sheamus to win it, but I would also love to see Gunther just chop Dom over and over. I'm going to predict Dom and just hope that we get that. But that's going to be all the time that we have for today's show. Join us again next week here on the Fatal 4-Way here on Blaze Radio. Thank you all for listening.